seen her around church, right?
I've been here forever.
Well, she's been here probably longer than some of your parents have been alive.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Louise joined the church the year I was born.
Whoa.
I've always remembered that fact because that made me feel so special, you know. And she's here to talk about something that we've been studying. What did we start talking about last week? The chalice. Who can tell me? I wasn't here last week. John wasn't here last week. Who can tell me what you talked about last week? Tell me a little bit about the chalice. Why is it important to us?
Because I don't know exactly everything. I can't remember exactly.
Just tell me what you remember.
The part of it is it's the symbol of freedom, and it was a symbol that got it to the people by in World War I or World War II.
World War II, yeah.
And it was put in the papers to make you look official enough.
You remember everything.
So they could get in, so the papers could get inside.
Did you have to know how to speak German or French or Polish or English to understand what the symbol meant? No, that's the wonderful thing about symbols. It was a picture, we could look at it and we would know who it was from. What is a chalice? What's the difference between a chalice and a drinking glass or a flower pot? Okay. Have you heard, has anybody read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire? Okay. Is a goblet a chalice? It is. It is. You'll see that a lot. Okay, we have a chalice which can be used for drinking, for sharing of the liquid in it. But, you know, if we leave them quietly on the paper, Louise is going to tell us what they're all about, and you'll probably be quite amazed. And why do we have the flame? The flame is an important part. Why the flame? Okay, who else? Why the flame? When your brain is burning bright, why the flame? AJ, why the flame? Why the flame?
I don't know. I haven't been.
I know you haven't been here, but I would think from last year you would know. Okay, flame of knowledge. Everyone can learn and grow. That's very important. Without the flame, it would just be a chalice. Okay. Did anybody notice something different in our room today? An object that we don't normally have in here? Well, the video camera, that's true. Look on the table. Is there something on the table that we don't normally have here? Yes, what would that be? Those things are there. Something big and shiny on the table that we, yes.
Candle wax.
And what is it?
Candle wax.
What is this?
What is that?
Chalice.
The chalice.
It
A
usually is where?
special chalice.
Do you know where it usually is?
Where is it usually?
It's usually in the
Yeah, this is
in the
Sanctuary, right. It's usually in the worship.
Yeah, yeah.
But today we borrowed it for a special reason.
There's a preschool class.
It's not candle wax per se.
Is it food?
Louise will tell you about it. So please welcome Louise Banky and her videographer, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Welcome, Louise. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
They asked me to come because the person who made this and gave it to the church for our use every Sunday in the sanctuary was my husband. He died a few years ago, but every time I look at this, I think about my husband, and that's one of the things the chalice means to me. But when I was your age, some of you are 10, aren't you? Good, okay. When I was your age and I first came here, we always talked about the chalice as being the symbol of truth learning. And so that always meant a lot to me. Well, a few years back, when we had Wendy Jerome for our minister, she said we didn't have a nice enough chalice. We didn't have much of anything for a chalice. So she knew my husband could do artwork and sculpture, and she asked him if he would design a chalice for us. He drew several pictures and showed them to Wendy, our minister, and she and one other person, some of you may have heard of Bud Gauger, and he and Wendy picked out the one they thought would be the best chalice for our church. And the design was this. Now the design was first, very first, a picture that he drew on a piece of paper. I would have brought that, except it's out in Portland, Oregon now with my daughter, so I couldn't show you that. But anyway, the very first thing you have to do you know what this is made of?
Metal.
Metal. Any kind of metal in particular?
Bronze.
You're right, it's bronze. And this is the word bronze up here. And it's made of two kinds of metals put together. They have to be melted. Yes, Judy? Copper and tin. Wow, very good. And they have to be at a very, very hot temperature in order to meld together, melt,
And made bronze.
and make bronze. And then you have to figure out a way to make them in a shape.
How do you, yeah, I know. How do you know to make iron to white or something?
Well, we aren't going to talk about iron today. We'll do that some other time perhaps. But what we really want to talk about is how do you start with a picture and turn it into something made of bronze. And there's a very special, very, very old way to do things. So many years old that it takes centuries back in history to look at the first pieces made of bronze. When you start, you have to have a shape of something that is sturdy enough. And each of you has a little piece of something in front of you that is beeswax.
Beeswax.
You have two? Well, you're lucky.
Well, that's because you borrowed one.
I've got 3.
It's sort of sticky, isn't it?
Did you?
And the bees made this. Actually, I cut up a candle. This, I had 2 of them, but I cut the bottoms off this one so each of you could have a piece of beeswax. You'll see that it's kind of hard, and if you push at it with your fingers,
It will stick.
well, it will stick, but it also will change shape a little bit. And I have here some pretty hot water. Let's see. Oh, it's not that hot now. It was pretty hot when I brought it in. If you put your beeswax down in here, and then let it get a little bit warm, you can make it into a little other shape than what you have. But you'd have to work at it pretty hard. So it's not going to be easy to do.
Oh,
But-
did you use this quickly and then you paint it with drawings?
No, we got several steps to work on. We first have to get the shape. And we have to use something that's going to be hard, that we can put a coating on when we get it to the right shape. We have to use tools of some kind. Let me close this door. It's kind of noisy out here. That's fine. We can use some tools. And I'm going to give each of you a little toothpick kind of thing where you can punch at your little pieces. And if you take Play-Doh and make it into a nice little shape, then you can bake it, make it really hard. But that's not what we want to do with this. We want to make our shape, and then we're going to coat it with something that is like
Play-Doh.
clay. Well, no, it's like
Clay.
clay pots that you have flowers in. Not the plastic ones, the clay ones.
Right.
And see, I can make mine curl just a little bit by squeezing it really hard. And once you get it into the shape you want, And it takes a long time to take a block of beeswax and make sure it's the right temperature so you can work at it and make all the little cuts in the edges and make it come out so that it's going to be the right shape. It will be exactly this shape when you finish doing the beeswax. Well, beeswax, that's soft stuff. You know, if it's a candle, you light the candle. Must have gotten wet. We had a little wetness around here earlier. But it begins, can you see it melting a little? Dripping onto the, there, it's dripping. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it melts, then you could work on the shape a whole lot more easily. So you get this shape all just the way you want it. Yep.
That's why, because hot water you can change it in minutes. Because when you put it in hot water, it kind of melts.
A little bit, and then you can make it into the right shape. That's right, exactly. Okay, so we finally get it into this shape, but it's wax. It isn't bronze. So we take some stuff sort of like glass a little bit, but it's not quite, and it's kind of thin, and we paint it all over, and we sprinkle sand on it. Then we take some a little bit thicker stuff and put it on, and we put sand on it until we have a big, thick coating of this whole shape, not bronze, wax, a whole shape, and then we want to get rid of the wax. And if we get rid of the wax, inside all of this kind of,
Plastic?
no, it isn't plastic. It's more like hard cement on the outside
Because we've
of
got
the
the
wax.
sand in there.
And we put coats and coats and coats. Well, when this was being formed, I didn't see it, but I can imagine that the piece that had the wax in it was probably about this big, and about this big. And it was more or less like this, but it had some funny leg-like things sticking on it. Like that.
Oh, is that what these were for, though? They were...
No, this is the part you're pointing to. That's a terrible drawing, I know, but that's the best I can do. Okay, so we have formed our wax, and we have put these funny little legs on it. And those are covered with that same kind of cement stuff. It's really, really hard. And we'll make a box around it like this. And all of this, all over the outside of this, everywhere, is all cement.
Can you even recognize the shape of the
You
original
cannot recognize the shape. It's just a chunk. Now we want to get rid of the wax that's in the middle. What are we going to have left?
A cement block.
A cement block?
Yeah, a cement block.
And chalice, like the tracing.
A tracing of the chalice.
To put
Very good.
bronze in, and then it dries.
What's going to be inside where that wax was?
Bronze,
Not yet.
tin, or copper.
No. It's going to be nothing.
It's
It's going to be nothing.
Yeah.
It's going, okay, put your hands together like this. Blow in it. You're going to blow out the wax. What have you got left?
Nothing.
Nothing. That's what we did with this. But the wax all drips out. So you have the hollow form inside. Okay, but now we've got a hollow form that we want to look like this in bronze. So, in a very, very hot oven, first we take this form and turn it upside down. These we're going to pour, when we turn this upside down,
Copper and tin.
we're going to have bronze. We're going to have these little holes here with the legs going down to our upside down chalice. Whoops. This is going to get tricky, isn't it? And then here comes the chalice itself. And this is inside hollow.
Why is one of the lines squiggly?
Well, that's because I have such a wiggly hand. So, we have this big block. It's all hollow inside, and we want to put the bronze in. Now, the bronze, our metal, somebody has been cooking for a long time in a very hot oven. Hotter than your mother can get her oven at home, about 4 times as hot as that can get, just to clean it. So it's a very, very hot, they call it a kiln. Actually, it's called a foundry process.
I've got part of the wiki.
Okay, the foundry is where the people that handle very hot metal, all kinds of hot metal, but we're interested in bronze. So they have melted all this hot metal together, and it's in very big, heavy crucibles. Now a crucible is another cup shape that can stand the very hot temperatures that's going to melt the bronze, but it's in chunks until it's melted, and it's sort of like pouring very, very hot pudding out of a pan. You have to be very careful. It's very heavy. Incidentally, I want you to find out how heavy this is. This end and you on this end. Whoops. I want you both to lift at the same time. 1, 2, 3. Oh, what do you think?
Not that heavy.
I thought it was very heavy.
Heavier than it looks, do you think? Were you expecting it to be a little bit lighter when you picked it up?
Would you like, would the,
I did not expect it to be as heavy as it was.
yeah, that's fine. Anybody else want to try to lift it? Oh, okay. Come on over here. Oh, wow. Very good.
Can I try to melt my beeswax then?
Well, hang on to him. Okay, let's let him try.
It's my kind of be heavy. Oh,
Wow.
it's not heavy.
Oh, it's not? Okay. Whoa.
Careful.
Yeah, because there's a liquid in there. You want to try it?
And glass.
You can try it over there by her. Okay.
Wait, yeah, it's heavier than I thought. Hey,
Okay.
give me back my beeswax.
Okay, there you go.
Hey, part of my beeswax is here.
Yeah, that is heavy, isn't it? Well, I'm glad you've all tried it. Now you'll know.
One of my beeswax.
Okay. Ah, that's heavy for
You
me.
can have one.
All right.
Now, John's gonna try it.
No, I'm not gonna try. All right, well, everyone can sit down, and then when Miss Louise is done.
Okay.
Have we ever weighed it, Louise?
Not that I know of.
It would be interesting.
Well, when you finish with pouring this very hot metal into our hollow block, the hollow block that this was, then you have all this stuff around it. Well, it takes 2 days for it to get cool enough for you to work on. 2 whole days to get it cooled down. When it gets nice and cool, you take a big hammer, a really big hammer,
And
you whack it. And you whack it.
What's the hammer called?
And that
A
knocks
mallet.
off all of the cement. And what do you have left?
A bronze can chalice.
With 2 funny looking legs. Because those funny looking legs were how you poured the stuff into the mold for this. Well, it's pretty rough on the outside. Not now, because it had to be worked and worked and worked. They call it chasing. And you have very specific tools to make it nice and smooth. It almost looks as smooth and shiny as your dad's trombone, right?
Yes.
It
Yes.
sort of looks like it,
Ab-
doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, sort of. But after a very long time of polishing and rubbing and making it smooth and shiny, then my husband put a nice coat of stuff that will preserve the surface. And there we have the chalice.
Now, I remember that he used to take it home in the summertime
And clean it.
and clean it and bring it back in the fall, and it was always exciting to have it back.
I didn't remember that.
Wasn't there another piece that
Yes.
he took off because it didn't work the way he
Well,
wanted it to?
now you may have a question about, it isn't quite oval shaped. It isn't quite even on the sides. One side is a little higher than the other. It's hard to tell from a distance,
Yeah.
but that means it was handmade. And he had it took him a long time to make it. You have a question over here?
Yeah, can I go get my chapstick? I need it.
Chapstick? Oh, I don't know anything about your chapstick, sorry.
I
Oh,
don't
I'm
know
asking
where-
if I can go get it because my grandma has it.
I
Oh,
think you'll live.
yeah, I think actually, take your beeswax,
Oh,
rub it
that's
on your
true.
fingers, and then rub it on your lips,
Rub it
because
on
that's
your lips.
exactly what
That's
some
what
of the
chapsticks actually
chapsticks are made
is.
of, is beeswax. How about that?
Think of that.
Okay, now,
Rub it with beeswax.
Beeswax is very important.
yep, it is. And if we lose all our bees, we're gonna have a lesson in environment now. You know, our bees are disappearing. This summer, I usually see a lot of bees around my garden. I only saw just a very, very few, and no monarch butterflies whatsoever. Any of you see any monarch butterflies this summer? Did you?
No fireflies
Not
either.
Washington.
Hardly
Yeah.
any fireflies.
I didn't notice that.
Oh, I saw. Oh, yeah, they're
Okay, well, that's the story of the chalice, and I've got the wrong date up here, because I think it was 1993, roughly.
It was here when I arrived.
When did you arrive, 93?
89.
80, it was here when you arrived?
89, I
When
thought.
did Wendy get here? Because it was with,
Wendy had been here for 7 years before I got here.
oh, well, then it was
It's
back
much
in the
older
80s.
than you think it is.
It was back in the 80s, well, it wasn't 81, let's call it 1987. That's close enough.
That's,
And we've been using it ever since. Do I understand there's going to be a new one?
I didn't know.
Oh, I didn't, I thought I heard you talk about that. Well, we won't
Oh.
start a rumor.
We, in worship today, they probably have our metal chalice. And our metal chalice has a little circle of stamp on it
Mm-hmm.
that has a flaming chalice, and we got our metal chalice, which is pewter, not bronze, but pewter,
I feel
we bought it from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and it replaced the chalice. And I have to tell you this story because we had a chalice that was pewter, had no stamp on it, just a plain pewter chalice. And pewter has a much lower melting point than bronze. It's easier to work. That's why a lot of the early colonial people made dishes and plates out of pewter. A class of children older than you decided that they wanted to experiment. And they took, and their teacher was there, and they took little pieces of paper, and they lit a whole lot of pieces of paper and put them in the chalice to see what would happen. What do you think happened?
pewter melt.
It melted. Indeed it did. A hole formed in the bottom of the chalice and pewter dripped down onto the table. They learned a very interesting scientific lesson. They also then had to raise $139 to buy a new chalice, which they did do.
Very good.
So, pewter soft, bronze hard.
Right. Now, you could take your little piece of wax home with you and ask your mom to get it into sort of warm water. not as hot as if she makes coffee, and this is already cooled
Cool, yeah.
from the room temperature. But when you make, get a little pan and put some hot water in it. And then you can form your wax into something, and you can work it with your little toothpicky kind of thing if you want. I saw somebody have it pressed into your wax.
Yeah.
And that's good, so that you won't lose the parts. And then you can work them at home. And maybe you can make a teeny tiny little chalice of your own.
It would need to be very small.
This,
Or maybe you could make a little kitty cat or a dog or a pretend cookie. You know, I was thinking about how am I going to tell you about how this works. And I was thinking about chocolate chip cookies. You know, once in a while when you have a chocolate chip cookie, you can break it and take out the chocolate chip. And then if you sort of stuck it back together, you could make a wax chocolate chip. Anyway, that's how, that's
But you
how.
were giving us this
Well, yes.
wax, and wonderful.
and if you
I never knew the whole story.
Well, now you can tell your great-grandchildren when you're as old as I am here at the church, all the story of the chalice.
Now, I told you I would tell you why the videographer was here, and it's an important thing. Louise is moving, after all these years, to Portland, Oregon to live near her daughter. And we're gonna miss her like crazy, and we didn't want the chalice story to be lost. So now, this is going to be the official video telling the chalice story, and you were here when it happened.
And I'll bet you were all in the video.